Okay, so we are recording. Okay, so you had just talked on what keeps people resilient.
Right. Several things. We're mind, body, spirit, soul, and the spirit and soul are actually different. The soul, even an earthworm has a soul, but our spirit, the spirit within us, it's something that we can be strong, we can be powerful, have a strong and powerful spirit. We can have the spirit of Christ as a Christian. We can have something that gives us that resilience, but we have to attend to all areas, mind and body and spirit. As a matter of fact, the pastor used to be called soul, and instead of psychologist, is soulologist, something to that effect. Because we tend, as pastors or ministers, we tend to people where, in places where they don't get out in public. They don't tell these things to everyone. We can see if someone is an amputee. We can see if someone has an injury. We can't see what's going on inside of them. And we all have some brokenness, which is all right. God, that's when God can reach into our hearts the best. So there are several things that we, as a peer team, I'm a member of the Fort Worth Police Department peer team, have been for 24 years. I'm a advanced member of the Critical Incident Stress Management team. I've done that for 24 years. I've been a chaplain and a pastor for 24 years. It's hard to believe it's been so long. But I'm an EMT now. I went to EMT school a few years ago just to be able to, I noticed that I'm getting older. I looked in the mirror, it scared me half to death. But I realized that being an EMT is not to take care of myself as much, but to be able to help, to love, and take care of others. So I retired from Fort Worth Police after 36 years. I'm still a chaplain with Fort Worth Police Department, and I work as a volunteer in all those areas I just mentioned. I was gang intelligence sergeant when I retired. I've worked in the roughest, toughest part of towns. I've worked as many as 5 murders a day. I have seen it all. There's not much I haven't seen. And the thing is, what happens to you physically and psychologically and spiritually after you see so many things that are just so absurd. It's like, this shouldn't be happening. It's so caustic. And the problem is, even our brain changes. So if we're a police officer, firefighter, and so forth, and we have the caustic work environment, and we do all 3 of those, and same thing for nurses now at hospitals and doctors, organically and structurally and chemically, our brain is a different organ. It's different. It's reshaped. It's been redefined, and it only takes about 3 years to completely change the mind. You change the physical brain, and then change the mind. I tell you one person I really recommend all of first responders to go to is a Dr. Caroline Leaf. And her book, she's got a bunch of them. She's incredible. Now I'll find that rascal here somewhere. I've got so many books that I read incessantly. But Switch on Your Brain is one of them, Dr. Caroline Leaf. And I like it because she shows and tells us how we can go in and change the way the mind works. So the brain doesn't necessarily tell the mind what to do, but the mind can be trained to tell the brain what to do. So literally, it's our mind that is so critical, more so even than the organic brain itself. So you can only see so many suicides and homicides and all the caustic things, the terrible things. I don't need to go into all of those, but it hurts us. So it also hurts us anybody can get compassion fatigue that lends themselves to listen to give an ear to someone as a counselor, as a friend, someone that's helping them go through difficult times. And that is like secondhand smoke. It's absolutely dangerous. It affects us in the same way. As a matter of fact,
pause you for just a second, because that's a term. It makes sense, compassion fatigue, but it seems like, is that a thing? I mean, it's definitely, I mean, we feel it, right? But what would be symptoms of compassion fatigue?
Burnout, suicidal tendencies, not being able to sleep, relationships falling apart, families falling apart, divorce, anger, bursts of anger. It's sometimes just all of a sudden for no reason you start crying and you get all these flashbacks of PTSD and so forth, and post-traumatic stress. They call it post-traumatic injury now, which instead of post-traumatic stress disorder, sometimes it's just post-traumatic stress. They don't have the disorder. It has to be at least 30 days. But now they're calling it post-traumatic stress injury because you're being injured mentally, emotionally, spiritually. It's an injury. And by thinking of it that way, medically, we can have a little bit better of an understanding. And so we have to make ourselves resilient. And the way to do that is take good care of your health, sleep, get enough sleep, have a regular bedtime if you can. It's hard for firefighters and officers or EMS that they go on rotating shifts. That's the worst thing that can happen to them because they're just not going to be healthy. As a matter of fact, here's something about police officers, and the statistics are very close also for firefighters, and I'll bet EMS, although I don't have those statistics. Police officers live 15 years less than the average American. 50% of the officers in America die within 5 years after retirement at the age of 50 years old. And you're 25 times more likely to die of cardiovascular disease. So it's not just the things we eat, though that does affect it. You don't have many places to go and eat on the beach. You have to eat in a hurry. You have to eat while you're driving fast. It's just not healthy in any way. When you're upset, you don't digest your food well, just like you don't sleep well. Nothing works as well when you're upset or you have that stress hormone response. And also spend about 99% of the time in boredom. You hear the same with firefighters, and about 1% of the time in just sheer terror. And boy, that certainly makes sense to me. There are times that I may work, like I said, 5 murders, and I may work a suicide. I may work 3 or 4 assaults, domestic disturbances, all those things. I may do that in the same shift. And when you see that much, you don't have time to reboot, if you will. For example, when I come home, my wife would not know what I've been through for that night or for that day. And she would say something like, well, the air conditioner doesn't work. The kids are not behaving. And I had to say, please, if you'll give me a few minutes, just a few minutes, let me decompress, and I'll be a lot better listener and a better husband, because you have these hormones, stress hormone response, they're raging in your system. They don't just go away quickly. One of the things we learn in those who treat people with post-traumatic stress is people know how to get their stress level up. Did you know if you lift your shoulders, it puts you in crisis. You start going into fight or flight mode, because when you go like this or lift your chest, straighten your back, like lift your shoulders, literally lift your chest. Now take a deep breath. Can't breathe good, can you? So the diaphragm locks and it sends a message to the vagus nerve, to the brain, says, oh man, to the heart, we're in trouble. And then you go into crisis. So it can happen that easily. So learning to relax, to practice like this, is dropping your shoulders. Smiling is important. You know, we have what's called mirror neurons. So when you see a monkey smile or see a person smile, even a statue, and we smile, right? Even I discovered that looking in the mirror, we logically know who we are, but your subconscious mind, it sees a smile, another person, just like a little baby looking in the mirror, a little dog looking in the mirror, you know how they do. And so smiling in front of a mirror is one of the best things you can do. It sounds silly. And don't do it when you're driving. That's just not safe. And don't be going like this. And don't do that when the police come and they're walking up. But it absolutely, absolutely helps. Just take a deep breath. Just take a few breaths and just relax. So I've studied meditation, yoga, anything. I'm a forensic hypnotist. I've studied hypnosis, anything that I can to help understand the mind better. one thing that I think that we need to pay particular attention to is first responders, or those who live with first responders, those who love first responders, have someone within their reach in the community or in their home, is having faith is critical. So we know, and I'll talk about this, a couple of different reasons it's so important. One thing, we know that you have about a 50% divorce rate within 2 years, whether you're a Christian or not, whether you go to church or not. It's still about the same. About half of them will be divorced within 2 years. So this is not to say, oh man, you really screwed up. This is to say, here, this may help you understand it. Did you know if husband and wife or father and son will just hold one another and pray, like Becky and I pray together every day. I like holding her hand. She's a knockout to me. She's just beautiful. 44 years this November, we'll be married. Nobody said it'd last, being a policeman and a karate fighter and all that. But we pray together, and the intimacy of just holding hands with no other expectations but to pray for one another, for the safety, for God to take care of them, it drops to less than 1 in 1,000 divorce rate.
Wow.
So whatever happened in the past, that's why they call it past. You passed it, right? It's gone. You can use that to help identify where you are, but that doesn't define who you will be. We can still continue to do that and define that. So for me, as a police officer, so I'd come home, Becky said, don't tell me about these things. Don't tell me about these things. And I've been involved in some very serious things. Even when I've been shot, I wouldn't tell her. She didn't know some of those things until years later, because I didn't get shot bad. It just skinned me here. I got hit here. I got hit here. I got hit, and it went around my vest and went out. I mean, I've been shot 4 times.
Wow.
And it didn't make a hole. It did clip a little piece of my ear off, and it grew back. My doctor says I must be some kind of a lizard. I don't know. I thought, well, that's funny. Okay. But I'm not going to try it again. But I know that if you have something to get your mind away from the carnage that you see, take a few minutes before you go in the house. So when I come home, I would change out of my uniform in my office, which is a guest house in the back of my home. And I would, on the way to the house, before I even get out of my office, I'm praying, I'm relaxing and so forth. And it drops my stress hormone level. I go outside, I have a bob. It's a little punching bag thing. I hit him several times. Sometimes I just hug him. I mean, I just need a hug. He doesn't have arms. It's hard to get that hug back. But something just about that hug, even though he's a rubber man, it's okay. And then by the time I go in the house, and then I'm okay. But I had to learn that. My wife had to learn, give me space for just a few minutes. And then, boy, I'm eager to listen to all that she has to say. It's hard to listen to all the crisis going on around you when you're in crisis. If you have faith, not only does it help your marriage, your relationship with your kids, relationship with the community, you live longer if you go to church and attend worship services regularly, regardless of the faith that you have. But something that we learned in World War II about post-traumatic stress syndrome and disorder. The most studied group in the world, according to my friend, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. He was a West Point psych professor, Army Ranger, one of my dearest, best friends. But they found that the ones that survived Hitler's death camps, for example, they said, well, what are the things, why are you still alive and the other people dead? And 100% of the people put the number one thing is their faith in God, because they had hope in the future. They did not feel alone. So people that don't have faith and don't foster that faith, and whatever the faith of their fathers, whatever the church or the spiritual group you grow into, you've got to have something beside yourself. And Zig said, I don't know what the future holds, but I know who holds the future. And for me, that gives me not only tremendous comfort, but it takes a lot of pressure off of me. I don't have, sometimes men, in particular police officers, they want to fix everything. And we find that we cannot do it. No matter, we drive away and there is still some brokenness left back there where we just left. But if we'll have that faith, it helps you to stay alive in a fight as well. So I've been in some bad fights. I've had to take lives. I have seen so much violence, and I got in more fights probably than most 20 police officers combined in Fort Worth, because I worked the toughest beat in town for years. I had 2 blocks by 8 blocks. I worked more murders on my beat on that 2 blocks by 8 blocks than the rest of the whole city, all 4 shifts, all 7 days combined. So they were rough people. And so I got in a lot of fights, but thankfully I know how to fight. But when I teach women's self-defense or police self-defense, or I teach people how to drop their stress level, what I do is I remind them what causes so much depression, grief, fear, isolation. It's because you're by yourself. And so we go to a call by yourself and you're going to face all these difficult things just mounting up, people yelling, screaming, and so on. How can you stay calm? Or if they're shooting at you or they're fighting with you, how do you stay calm? So what I do is, it's because of my faith, I always ask that God be with me, to leave his spirit with me, not to leave me alone, not to abandon me. But if God is with me, I remember the scripture, who could be against me? With God on my side and God with me, I know I'm going to be okay. And if I'm not, I'm still going to be okay. It's going to be all right. But I don't have panic. I don't feel isolated. I feel like almost like some of those people that talk to themselves. Never lonely. You always have somebody. Of course, Zig said it's okay to talk to yourself. And he heard it's also okay to answer, but if you say, you better go get some help. So what I do is I go out alone. So let's say, one example, police officer kills a guy shot the officer. We're in a tough housing community, and it's predominantly Crips and Bloods, generations deep. I mean, it's been Crips and Bloods since there were Crips and Bloods. It's a tough area. Also, some of the kindest people out there as well. I love working the east side of Fort Worth. But I go there and there are hundreds and hundreds of people. Officers are nervous, shaking, guns pulled. I mean, because people are threatening, and there are more guns out there. And that, believe me, in that housing community, they have more guns than as many people as we can get out there. I mean, it's a rough area. And so what I do, I take a breath and I say, God, be with me. I get out of the car slowly. I walk, I don't run, I don't look nervous, I don't look panicky. People say, how do you stay so calm? That's how. I'm not by myself, I'm not alone. And then what I'll do, I'll look at the people, I'll go, just a second, and I'll ask the officer, well, what's happening? He said, well, man, these people threatening to kill people and start more violence. And I said, well, hold on just a second. By the way, one of the officers, oh, thank God, it's Sergeant Morris. And I don't think it's because I can fight. I can fight. I mean, they know that. But it's because I bring calm to crisis. I bring calm to despair. So I walked up to one of the guys that was yelling and screaming, and I dropped my voice, I relaxed my face, and I looked him in the eyes, and I said, could I ask you a question? Yeah. I said, what is it that everybody's upset about? If you tell me, I'll do what I can to help. I'm a sergeant, I can make a difference. Well, then tell me what's going on. I said, well, I just drove up, as you know, so if you'll allow me to take a few minutes, I'll go find out, and my word, as a man, I'll come back and I'll tell you what's going on. Is that fair enough? Oh yeah, that's fine. So then everybody, they drop their shoulders. So I go, come back, and I did that, and everybody went in. They went in the house, they went in apartments. They weren't able to do much. But by staying calm, even though the common reaction, you had a guy shot an officer, the officer shot and killed the guy, you have hundreds and hundreds of people yelling and screaming and wanting to start a riot. How can you go into that calm? Don't go there by yourself. So I always tell people, never go anywhere alone. You have an extra situational awareness, a spiritual situational awareness. you know more about what's going on around you when you're not going by yourself. It's interesting how that works, but that's my secret. It's easy. It's free. Everybody can do it.
I like free. That's in my budget.
Yeah.
I like what you said about bringing calm to the situation and how it doesn't really matter what field of work you're in, or if you're in a family situation, how much that could make a difference, because so often the challenges that we're reacting to how somebody else is coming in all puffed up, or you don't even know what they're going to say, but you just feel that tension.
Oh, yeah.
So when you're talking about just the simple physiology changes, you're changing the pace in which you move, you're changing your posture, your facial expression, the tone of your voice, how you're breathing, and you're asking open-ended questions.
And I smile.
And you smile.
It works.
If anything, especially in a challenging, like violent situation, people are going to be confused, and that will throw them off enough for you to connect with them.
Time I was shot at, another officer I was shot at, while there's a big crowd in that same community. It's a rough area. Two guys shot themselves, bleeding from brains coming out. I mean, it was a big mess. And everybody comes out again. So while I'm out there, officers are nervous. And so somebody shot, he was right beside me, and the other officer heard a whistle as well. And then I said, Sergeant Morris. And I'm looking around for somebody with a gun so I can go say hi. And I didn't see anybody. So I look at these officers, and they said, they were the zero tolerance, like SWAT team. They got their rifles. They're just shaking. They said, this guy won't take his hand out of his pocket, Sergeant. He won't take his hand out of his pocket. I said, oh, no problem. I'll get that. Hold on. So I walk up to this guy who's nearly 7 foot tall. He had a little bit of legs, looked like a lollipop. He was huge. This guy was big. And I'm trying to think, where can I hit him, man? I can't even reach his legs. What am I going to do to hit this guy? I can't hit his head. I can't jump that high. So I walk up to him, had my gun in my hand. I don't yell and scream. I'm very quiet in conflict. And I said, take your hand out of your pocket or I'm going to kill you. He goes, like, pulls his hand out like that. And I heard the officers breathe. They started breathing again. And then I said, now this guy was giant. He was the OG. He was the head of the gang in that community. And I talk quietly because I don't want to put him where he has to feel like he has to show off to anybody else. Mm-hmm. And I said, now what I want you to do is go back into your apartment or I'm going to knock you out. And he goes, and he lumbered away like a big old bear. And I thought, whew, that's good. He was a huge guy. But could I have dropped him? Oh yeah, I've been in more fights, but I didn't have to. But the key is I kept calm. I relaxed. If you tighten your eyes, you look mean. But if you relax your eyes, they see calm and gentleness and so forth. And so I talk to people quietly many times. So one officer and I go to an apartment, this great big guy, not as big as this guy, but he was huge and he was beating up a woman. And we're looking up, it's I think third floor of an apartment complex. And so we went up there, went on in the door. I don't remember if we kicked the door open or if it's open. I don't remember. I've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of those. And this guy standing out on the balcony. I said, all right, now I want you to let go of her for just a moment. And went back in. And I said, now let me tell you, you're a big man. And I would really hate to have to throw you off this balcony. That's a long drop. You're going to get hurt if I do that. I said, why don't we go back inside? Okay. So we go back inside. I talk gentle and quiet. And as I do, we just started communicating. Everything went fine. And the officer reminded me, he said, you remember what you did, Sergeant Morris? Do you remember what you did? I said, well, I don't know. I don't. And I've done it many times. He said, we all got together and you prayed for that family. And they left just loving one another, apologizing, and nobody was hurt. And I was able to go in and turn their mindset, and it makes a terrific difference. So learning how to bring calm into someone who just lost a child, to bring calm and still understanding and kindness to all the difficult things that you see as a firefighter or police officer or EMS. So about being an EMT, I mean, I've worked some as an EMT. I do all those things now. As a police officer, I'm an EMT, I'm a chaplain, I'm a biblical counselor. I do critical incident stress management, peer team counseling, and I'm on the Texas Line of Duty Death Task Force. So that means I'm a chaplain. Anytime a police officer, firefighter, or EMS, including the doctors at the hospital, ER, I'm the guy that goes when they're suicidal or they suicide or they die or they have COVID. And I'm one of those guys that go in and brings calm. And I've been told I'm very good at that, but it's not because I'm doing it by myself. I'm only good because I'm walking with one who is good and is good at dealing with people in their crisis.
So you go in when the internet connection was a little fuzzy there for a second. So just to go back to what you said for a moment, you go in when a police officer, a first responder, a doctor or nurse is dealing with a suicidality, or they themselves are in a situation where they've lost life, and you're in a setting with their family, or that's just, how does that, I mean, without getting too graphic or anything, but how does that setting work? And tell us more about how you bring calm.
Well, first you have to be called to do that kind of work. Same thing for police or firefighting or being a pastor. It's hard. And being a chaplain is different than my role as a pastor. A pastor, it's in a clinical environment. It's in a building most of the time, or you'll go out and you'll have dinner with somebody. And I like that. Methodist Church, they feed their pastors real good. And as a chaplain, you're out there when people are, they're literally in pieces all over the freeway, or at the worst time in a family's life, the very worst time in their life. I've been called to go to be with a mother when she went to view her son's body that hung himself. I've been called to go identify a police officer's brother that was killed by an 18-wheeler. And I have gone to I've done more death notifications and those kinds of things. But I always go with gentleness and kindness. And if you do that, people see you're genuine. You really want to help. One time I go to a house on the east side. It's off East Lancaster. And as a chaplain, they would send when somebody would die. A lot of time, all police officers are required to go when people die in Texas. The police are required to go unless they're on hospice or they die during surgery in the hospital. So I was asked if I could go up there. I said, I'll go talk to her. Well, I go to the house, and this poor woman, she is beside herself. She is just grieving. She's crying uncontrollably. I said, ma'am, I'm Officer Morris. I'm also a chaplain. What can I do to help you? She said, well, he's inside on the floor beside the bed. I said, would you like me to go in there? She said, yes. So I'll go in there, and there's like a 20-foot python. I almost say snake. It was a big snake. That was her pet. And so I tried to keep my composure. I said, ma'am, would this be him? She said, yes.
Oh my goodness.
I don't know what I'm going to do with that. I don't know how I'm going to handle it. Life is too hard anyway. I'm going to miss him. I don't sleep by myself. I sleep with my snake. And I said, well, and you got to be kind. I had to bite my lip 2 or 3 times. And then I said, would you like me to say a prayer? I said, no, police stay until the medical investigator comes. But when animals die, generally what we do is we call animal control. She said, okay. I said, let me say a prayer. I said, what's his given name? She said, Slinky. I said, Lord, I ask you to be with this woman whose head is bowed down in grief at this time. Let her feel your compassion, your kindness, and tenderness at this time. And God, you know where Slinky goes, and that you'll take care of that appropriately. In Jesus' name, amen. And she just, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. And then I thought, wow, look at what we see all the time. So that one, you never know what you're going to run into, right?
Yeah.
I was called one of my black belts. He called me. He asked me if I'd talk to his daughter. She wants to be a police officer. She came up to the gang unit and We talked and I shared Christ with her. She's also Christian. And we just had a great time. And anyway, I gave her some insight and she became a police officer. She was going to do it in Midlothian. I get a call a year or so later and he calls me and said, Richard, I need your help. I said, whatever it is, tell me. He said, well, my daughter was hit by an 18-wheeler and she's brain dead and they're going to take her off life support. And I want you to be there if you will. And part of me said, and so I said, oh, I don't want to go. I don't want to go because she's such a cute girl. And I encouraged her. So all the feelings in my head, I said, of course I will. And so I went. We were standing around the bed and I held this, I said a prayer and then I held this girl's hand as they took her off life support until she would pass away. I have been called so many times as a chaplain to be there and hold their loved one's hand as they cross from this world to the next. And I'm going to tell you what I think. It's good when children are being born. That's wonderful seeing life come into the world. But there's nothing, I don't think, any more sacred than being there to help escort someone to be with God at that time, to be able to move and transform to that new body and so on. So it's hard. I still cry. Sometimes I go home and cry. It reminds me, police officers that know me, they know one thing, I can fight. I've been teaching karate 50 years, police officer 42, so I can take care of myself. But they also know that I'm gentle and I'm kind. And sometimes I cry. And I tell these guys, I said, look, if you hold this stuff in, you'll end up drinking too much. Your relationships will fall apart. And I tell them all the danger signs. I said, here's what I do. I go watch, my wife likes to watch Hallmark movies. Well, I like my wife. And I love being around her. Sometimes she makes popcorn. I mean, we have fun. We have fun just reading the phone book together. I love that girl. So I watch a Hallmark movie and almost always I cry. I get teared up in a good way. And they say, oh, sorry, but you don't want to be crying. I said, remember, 10th degree black belt, I'm your sergeant. I cry whenever I want to. Yes, sir. But men in particular need permission to know it's okay to cry. John Wayne, his pastor was Robert Schuller towards the end of his life. And he told Robert, he said, you know, Pastor, the thing that I regret the most is I've been in over 100 movies and I've never cried on screen. And that's the biggest, most shameful mistake because I cry when I'm at home. He said, men need permission to cry. And I believe it's all right. I think my officers, they love me because I love them, but they also know I'm genuine. I'm transparent. It's all right to cry. I don't cry if I stub my toe. I don't cuss. I remember, I don't use bad language, but I quit that a long time ago. But it's all right to show your humanity. You live longer. God tells us that our tears are so precious that he catches them in a cup. He contains our tears. In other words, while we're over there crying, he's not playing bingo somewhere. I mean, he's right there with us. We may not see him or feel his presence, but he's there. And so when Jesus would heal, even spittle in New Testament, Old Testament times, it was something sacred, spittle or tears. And so Jesus would use spittle, spit, and then he'd wipe it on the guy's eyes and the guy would see, if you remember the story, when he healed the blind man. And so now they don't want us to spit in people's eyes. This is not right. You don't want to do it like that anymore. We have other ways, but tears are sacred to God. God loves us when we have. He doesn't want us to be broken, but he loves to be there when we are. My children, I love to be there when they're happy, but I consider it a great honor and responsibility to be there when they're not. I am not a fair weather friend. You know, a fair weather friend is there anytime they need you. But I'm the kind of person that'll be there in the worst kind of storm. And I think my family and my friends respect me because of that. That's the way we're supposed to be. That's the way we were designed to be. We're not meant to be alone. We're meant to love each other. Did you know, because of this pandemic, officers in Fort Worth now, about half of their calls, an ambulance comes as well. It never used to be like that. You'd see one every now and then. It's because of the mental illness. It's because of depression. It's just people are falling apart out here. And so this is a tough time. This is a tough time.
Yeah. Well, you talk about, being like a loyal friend and being there for people and loving on them and being there in the most challenging times. And when just going back to what you were first talking about, how do you maintain yourself? I mean, you talked about transitions from work into home to help relieve some of that. But
Yeah.
what else can you do as somebody who's on the front line, or as a first responder, police officer, firefighter, veteran, anybody that's in those situations? I mean, everybody's a frontline worker right now, right? I mean, if you have a neighbor, if you have any kind of contact with another human being, this is a global situation that we can't escape at the moment, right? So how do you maintain yourself on a regular basis so that you can still be there for others, but you're also not putting yourself at risk?
One of the most important things we learn in both the Old and New Testament, the two greatest laws is to love God with all of your heart and your mind and your soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. Doesn't mean you're supposed to love yourself, start kissing yourself, that type of thing, but we're going to take care of ourselves generally if we're okay mentally. But we need to love our neighbor. Rabbi Daniel Lapin says, God is never happier than when we're helping his children. And so when we show that love to other people, it's interesting because the more you love sending it out, the more you receive. And it's not always that way. Sometimes you're kind to people and they're mean to you. But that's okay. I realize it's not me. If I'm in uniform, it may be my uniform. If it's because I'm white, it's maybe because I'm white. Or maybe they had a bad day. There's something that they're not telling me. Maybe they're going through a tough time. So if we can sometimes just take a little time to get away. I remember one time I was deeply depressed. My brother died, my aunt died, my mom died. I lost about $600,000 over 9 months, people stealing from me and so on. And I was laying in the backyard of my house and I was crying. And I was just in anguish. And I said, God, I don't know what to do. And then it's like I heard a voice, not an audible voice, but inside. I looked up and the voice said, only when you look up, you're flat on your back, can you see all the stars. We need to take time to look at nature around us. We need to take a walk in the woods, to walk through the neighborhood and listen to the birds. Pay particular attention to all the nature sounds around you. It's called forest therapy. It's one of the most effective forms of therapy, forest therapy. That's a real thing. It's free. It's free. And so I like to, sometimes I'll come out and I have a hammock I can put up and I'm in my backyard. I can hear the birds and the squirrels. Sometimes the squirrels will throw nuts on me. I mean, they have a mean spirit. I'm trying to work with them about that. To see the stars and to hear the trains and the cars. I love it because we don't look up often enough. I remember Zig said, Richard, when the outlook's not good, just remember the uplook. It's always good. And so we need to take that time, instead of just looking at all the chaos around us, looking in the mirror, see how stressed we look and so on. Sometimes we just need to take that time and I mean, physically, literally look up. It really helps. And I don't do that often enough. You know, we know the adage, take time to smell the roses. Best not to right after they fertilize. But we need to take time to enjoy the goodness that God has given us around us. I have a little dog. It's my little therapy dog. It's about that big. She weighs like 14 pounds. She's 10 years old. She's half pug and half Shih Tzu. And just the cutest little thing. If she thinks I'm mad at her, she drops her head down. I'm out in my office. She's looking out the back door, just staring at me. She misses me, and you can tell it really hurts her. And then I come in, she's crying and jumping up and down. And I think having a pet's a good thing. I don't know about snakes, but I have a cat that's kind of nice most of the time, but my dog is sweet all the time. So I have a puppy. One thing that I've done for several military folks that come back with post-traumatic stress disorder after they've been through a lot of combat is I help write letters, and I've written letters to help them to get a therapy dog paid for by the government. They're expensive, not cheap. And so I'm glad I've been able to help do that a time or two. And it just makes a difference. When you have a pet, your heart rate drops, your blood pressure improves, your overall health is better, you sleep better. Now I've got one little thing, I'm gonna have to work this out with my dog. She sleeps with my wife and I, and she's little, but she'll nudge you right off the bed. But it's just incredible it's because you have companionship. Again, we are not meant to be alone. God told Adam, it's not good for man to be alone. Well, that goes for men and women both. It's not good for us to be alone. We're supposed to live in community with one another. And a Zoom community is not quite the same as being there where you could just give them a big hug and look in their eyes and tell them you love them. But it's a whole lot better than watching the news.
Mm-hmm.
I tell officers, don't watch the news. Well, I want to know what's going on. I said, someone will tell you if it's bad enough. I said, don't watch the news. Every now and then I'll record it to get to the weather, but I don't watch the news. It's, did you know that watching something negative or talking to someone who is negative for 5 minutes lowers your immunity for more than 9 hours?
Wow.
So we need to hang around upbeat people. So I remember when the show 24 came out. I mean, it grabs you, it's so exciting. And we had all the season. We watched too fast. But we'll go to bed at night. I said, Becky, before I go to bed, I think I'm going to have to watch at least 1 or 2 Andy Griffith shows because I don't want to accidentally reach over and kill you in my sleep. So, and I was serious. So I watch Andy Griffith show. Barney is hilarious. He makes me laugh. But we need to find something that brings joy and laughter, whether it's to help someone. So we have a grocery store by our house. It's a lower end store. And I go there because it's not far from my home, but also because I get to help people there. It may just be a smile. It may just be to reach up and grab the green beans for them. It may be when I see them look at their little purse and they're going like this, and you can tell they don't have enough money. And they're fat, marbled beef, it's just mostly fat. It's all they can afford. So if I have the financial ability, I'll say, ma'am or sir, would you give me the opportunity to bless you so that I can in turn be blessed in doing so? Well, why would you do that? I said, well, from what I understand, God sure does love you. And that means that I love you too. And so it's hard for people to say they love one another, strangers, especially for a man to a man. But I'm going to tell you, my son, he's almost 41. My daughter just turned 37. But wherever we are, if they're getting ready to leave, I say, bye, Dad, I sure love you. Come give me a hug. I don't care if their friends were there. And that's important. And I always say, I love you too. So Chuck Norris is a good friend of mine for almost 50 years. And so he still kisses his boys, kisses his kids, because he loves them. And sometimes Chuck will kiss me on the cheek, just like he would his own son. He told me I'm one of his 2 best friends in Texas.
Well, you trained him in karate, right?
No, I did help with the fight scene one time on Hero on the Terror. I've trained with him. I've been on movie sets with him many times, but I did 1 movie with him. I've been in 4 movies, but I'm not interested in movies anymore. I'm interested because that's too much. Look at me. I don't want that.
Yeah.
A good teacher doesn't show you what the teacher can do. A good teacher shows the student what the student can do. And that's what I'd rather do. But yeah, we sparred, and he had a full contact team in California called the LA Stars. And Pablos, my teacher, had a full contact kickboxing team here called the Started off being the Fort Worth Texans, and then they changed it to the Texas Gladiators. So I'm one of the first kickboxers, full contact fighters. So, oh, here's something funny. I got to tell you this. So I had one of my black belts. She has her friends, girls that she knows, and a guy that she knows. She said, would you mind if I brought them over to teach them for a little bit? I said, no, sure. So they're young. One of them was 47, one was 48. So to me, that's young. And I talked to them for a while, and they went in. And then they said, did you know that Richard Morris is the baddest dude in the planet? That guy's hands are like sledgehammers. And one of them said, you mean that sweet little grandpa? Oh, that tickled me. I still get tickled. I don't mind being a grandpa. One time I had a young female officer flirting with me, and I knew that should happen. And she said, are there any more like you at home? I said, well, I'll look when I get there. I said, my brothers, my older brother's married, my little brother you wouldn't want to marry. And she said, oh man, doggone it, it's a shame you're gone. I said, no, I've got room for one more. She said, what, really? I said, yeah, just call me Pawpaw. And so and I love her, she's so sweet, but it changed the dynamics so quickly. And they lovingly call me Pawpaw. I still get called Pawpaw all the time. That was almost 20 years ago.
That's so sweet.
I don't mind being Pawpaw. 2 grandbabies, they're sweet girls, and there's nothing better than being Pawpaw for me.
I think there's some really interesting wisdom in that particular situation you've just shed light on, how we can very quickly and gently change the dynamic of a situation with our words if we're lighthearted about it. And we can still be loving without putting ourselves in harm's way or anybody else or having it be embarrassing, but you can still have that agape love and have it be that, and that's it.
My officers say, Sarge, you love everybody. I said, I really do. I really do. What a blessing it is for me not to have people that I don't love, that I hate, that I don't have any of those people in my life. And I said, when you have that spirit of love, that's when you have the eyes of Christ. You have compassion and gentleness. People see a different you than if you don't have that. And I said, for me to be able to love someone, whether it's to help them after they fall, and a little old man fell, and I was of course EMT, so then I parked my car and ran over there and helped him. And it was nothing serious, gave him a Band-Aid and let him sit down for a while. But boy, for me, I love serving people. I'm a helper. You're a helper, which is what caused you to do all that you do, to love and to help other people. That's what people are missing. It's not the things you get that make you truly happy. It's what you can give. Mm-hmm. That's what makes you happy. And I don't necessarily mean money, but when you give of yourself, that's the most important thing of all. My daughter wrote me a letter when she was over in Ireland. She was on a missionary, ended up marrying a pastor who's a missionary 10 years ago. But she was over there and she wrote me a long letter, a page long. And it was so, I saved it. If I get sad, I look at my Michelle letter. She said, Daddy, as I sit over here in the land of our ancestors, I see all the girls that are here and they cry, and they all had bad relationships with their dads. They never really had that bond. And then I think about us. Daddy, you're my best friend. I know that when I feel ugly, you tell me I'm beautiful. When I'm sad, you can make me smile. When I'm hurt, you can bring me comfort. And so on like that. But what's that worth? So she gave me something that's worth more than money. Mm-hmm. I love it. So I read it all the time. I have it right here in my drawer.
I love that.
Encouragement. And it's always good when your kids tell you they love you. And then they see not everybody has a loving dad, mm-hmm. or a loving mom or loving children. So I think I learned a lot of that from Zig. When I would go to church with Zig was truly my mentor and hero. I mean, we'd call each other and encourage each other. He'd call me at sometimes 10 o'clock at night. And I just love, really, he's gone, but he's still here for me. I still read and listen to Ziglar. I love Tom. I love
Yeah.
Tom's sisters. I love the family. But Zig taught me how important it is to really to love your spouse. And he and Gene would sit on the third or fourth row of the church. I asked Tom the other day, I did an interview with him on Facebook Live, and I'll send you a copy of that. I know
Yeah.
I'll here somewhere. And I said I'd see them in the same place. And you know what, Tom? I saw them kiss right there in church more than once. They were close together. I said, they always sit in about the same place. Did they buy the pew like they used to?
Funny.
Tom got tickled. But he taught me the importance of continuing to date my wife, of being kind and gentle. And I'm telling you, I have been in some bad fights and so on. I have seen so much, but people say, well, how can you be like this? I said, oh, it was noise. I put up the barrier for a while. I was unreachable. I drank too much. I was suicidal. I understand. But the thing is, Paul tells us that when we suffer and we're comforted by God, that gives us the ability to one day then comfort others with a similar suffering. In other words, once you've experienced it, if you make it through it, we're the best people to help those folks. So when I talk to crowds of police officers, we get each other. They know where I've been and what I've seen, and we really connect. Same thing with military, and it's because, and EMTs and firefighters, it's because we share that same type of suffering. And if I can encourage one of these people that serves their life for service, you don't become a police officer or firefighter to get rich. You do that because you have something in your heart that says, you go help people. You go help people. And then sometimes they stray away because, again, all the anguish, all this toxic stuff that they see. So I do everything I can now. Now, I'll be 65 in a couple of months, and I'm retired as a policeman. I'll probably work as hard as I ever have. I'm not going to completely retire. I just, like Zig said, I don't get retired. I won't be retired. I'll be refired. And that's what I just move in a different direction. But everything that I do now is about service. I teach first responders. I teach self-defense programs. I haven't done as many seminars. I've only done, one or two seminars since COVID. I had to cancel big seminars that I was doing because of COVID. But I'm telling you this, for me, sometimes we have to sit down and be quiet and listen. God doesn't speak to us. He doesn't shout at us. He speaks to us when things are quiet. So if you look back at Isaiah or Elijah, you look back at times in your life when you really feel God's presence, it's not when you're busy. It's when you're having that quiet time. I love having Becky and I both do this. We have quiet time in the morning. Now, she doesn't like it when I sing. I think it's great. I feel great after I sing, but she doesn't, so we have to close doors. If I'm taking a shower, I can't help it. I said, well, Becky, don't you want me happy? Yeah, but no, I'm suffering. I'm suffering. I said, well, then I'm not going to go on The Voice. But we take time to contemplate what's important in our lives, things that we're grateful for. We pray for one another and for other people that they need it. We do Bible study, and we talk about things that are important. It doesn't take but a few minutes, but if you'll spend 10 or 15 minutes a day and spend that time with God and maybe some planning and praying, oh my gosh, your day is like 10 times better. You get more accomplished, you feel better, and you just have a better sense of self-esteem. We need to take that time. I like Bob Bodine with the two chairs. We
Mhm.
all need to have that time with God.
Mhm.
And if you spend a little over 14 minutes a day, that's about 1% of the time, 1% of that day that you spent with God. We're supposed to give him the first 10%, but he understands one. We have to sleep, we have to do other things as well. But taking something about the first thing in the morning when it's quiet, before pagers or phones go off, before the email starts beeping and all that kind of stuff, phone ringing, it really is good to have that quiet time.
And to look forward to it every day, that routine to like anchor in,
Yeah, I
to
love
have like that
it.
starting line, right?
And it's free. That's the thing, it's free.
I love all the free resources you're giving us.
If you feel bad, go love somebody. It's free.
Mhm.
Open the door at the grocery store. Sometimes Becky would say, you know what? Why don't you go down to Fiesta for a little while? I think that you need some time to help other people. I said, okay. She knows I always come back with a story, and I always come back being able to share love. One time I told Michelle, my daughter, I said, man, I had a vision. I saw a woman, I could hear her voice, a heavy-set black woman. She's an older woman, can hardly walk. And I saw her crying. And I saw that she needed money for her family to buy food. She's older. I said, I'm going to go to the store and see if we can find her. She said, okay, Dad. So because she knows when I have visions, they'll always happen, almost always. So we go down there and I don't see her. Went to the store and go, no, that's not her. Nope, that's not her. Because I knew what she looked like. I know what she sounded like. So anyway, I'm open the door again. I'm not just a gentleman for my wife. I'm a gentleman for my daughter. So she'll expect the same out of her husband. So I open the door and she gets in and I heard the voice, oh, I'm sorry. I said, oh, pardon me. And I looked, I knew the voice. That was her. I said, Michelle, I think this is her. I turned around, it was her. That was the girl that I saw. I say, girl, she's like 75 or so, or older. And she said, I'm sorry. I'm just not paying attention. My husband said, well, you might as well stay home. She said, but I got to get you something to eat. You got to have something to eat. But she said, well, I've only got $4. He said, well, just do what you can. And don't worry about it. Well, I know God will provide whatever way, it'll be fine. So anyway, I said, ma'am, I want to tell you something that I believe that God has told me before I came here today. I said, God told me that I'm going to meet a terrific woman, and I believe that this is you. And wanted me to tell you that he's had his eye on you since you were just a little girl, and that he absolutely loves you. And she just started bawling. So, and I said, also, I'm to give you this. So I gave her quite a bit of money. And she said, oh, I can't believe it. And she's crying. And she said, I've never seen anything like this. I said, well, ma'am, I tell you what, can I do anything for you? I said, well, if you wouldn't mind, if you could pray for our police officers, I'm worried about them today. If you'd say a prayer, and boy, when the girl prayed, she prayed, and man, it's like the heavens shook. And of course, my daughter's just crying. And then as we're driving away, the sweet lady, she's in the handicap parking space. I parked next to the handicap. I'm just getting ready. I'm moving over a little as I'm getting a little older. And one day I'll probably be in that spot. I made my sidewalks wider so my wife and I could walk hand in hand. I really did. And so as we're driving away, she's still crying. And then I see this guy walking up to her and he sees her crying. He looks at me like, you bad man. He wanted to tear me up. And then he walks over to her and I just nodded at the guy and I drive off. And he goes, oh. And then he looks at me again and he looks at her again. He thought I must have mistreated her. I would never do that. But I think that he learned something that day too. Don't just judge too quickly, until you find out what's going on. But what a joy was that for me and for my daughter to be able to see that and to see that I don't have a lot of money, but if I'm able to share some of what I have with someone who has less, $4 won't get you much. And she was just out in the car. She said, I've just been out here praying and crying. And I don't know how I'm going to get anything for. I just don't know. And she wasn't asking me for money. I gave her the money before She made any mention of it. So I said, well, God provides, doesn't he? And I said, this is not for me. This is from God. He gave me the opportunity to pass it along to you, but oh, it belongs to him. Now it belongs to you. So, I went home a new man, a different person. And I don't help people to get that feeling. That would be selfish. But God rewards us with an extra boost of all the chemicals, the dopamine, the serotonin, all those things that we need, the oxytocin that make you feel joy and happy. I think that's one way that God rewards us when we do something for somebody else. And so I like getting rewarded. I'm like a puppy. I like to treat. I'm missing my dog. Can you tell?
I think that's so sweet, though. I mean, just so many examples of putting, what you preach into practice.
Yeah.
And to do it in a way that is authentic, like really authentic, not just saying so.
Yeah, people tell me, hey, Richard, you're the real deal, man. You really do care about people. You really are a tough guy. Well, I'm the same all the time. As a police officer, my personality doesn't change. I don't get tough like that, I'm the same guy all the time. As a husband, as a father, as a friend, I'm just who I am. And maybe being called a sweet little grandpa, I guess I'm at the point where it's starting to describe me more as I'm starting to show my age. But what a joy to be known for being kind. And that's, for me, I've been known for being tough. That's not important to me. It is I can take care of myself and I can help other people take care of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But I like it when people can see that maybe I really am kind, because I'm the same all the time. I don't have to learn a whole new thing.
That would be a lot of work.
A lot of work. Well, one thing that I do, and God has really put it in my heart, is to help people stay safe. One thing that God has put in my heart, and I haven't figured out how I'm going to do it yet, but I've been so upset about all when the Asians were killed at the massage parlors, and not just several weeks ago. And it just breaks my heart to hear how some people feel like that they feel scared all the time. And I've had people say, well, those massage parlors, they're prostitutes. But then I say, well, maybe so, but let me tell you this. A little girl doesn't grow up and say, oh, mama, daddy, I want to be a prostitute when I grow up. They don't do that. I said, these are people most probably victims of human trafficking. And I have worked human trafficking. I see human trafficking. And that's a place where a lot of the women get forced into sex labor like that. And so I thought, I've done seminars all over the world. I've taught hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. Maybe I'll do a self-defense seminar for women again. I haven't done one of those in a year and a half or so, but invite those that maybe feel, because of the color of their skin or whatever it may be, somehow they feel marginalized, or maybe they feel afraid. And maybe I can help them. So I do seminars for the police department. I always do those for free. And I've been on Nightline with Ted Koppel, CNN, Good Morning America, NBC Nightline with Peter Jennings, a lot of news. But it's always because I did something for free, and I always gave the police department the credit, because I want the police to be seen as people that care. In Fort Worth Police Department, it's one of the most caring departments I've ever seen. They're always doing something for other people. I love that. Makes me proud.
It's amazing, especially in a time where if you do watch the news, most of what you see isn't good news. Wow. And it's not representing the whole of police everywhere of what we're seeing. It's tragic. It's unfathomable, but it's happening. And yet there's still a community of people who are serving communities around them and still face this global crisis on top of an already difficult job.
We have
So
police and fire, EMS. We have to sometimes wear a mask because you can't be, you got people laying all over the freeway, cars are coming. You can't go, oh my gosh, this is terrible. What am I going to do? No, don't have time for that. You've got to get out and you've got to work and you've got to save lives. You got to do it. You put your life at risk. But I'm going to tell you, if you don't take time later to get by yourself and cry after you see a child killed in an accident or something tragic, it's going to fester inside of you. You've got to cry and just let it out. I just give it to God. So police officers felt comfortable with me and cried in front of me. I did a seminar in Fort Worth at the time. Ziglar, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, he's a top military police trainer, good friend. And I had a police chaplain, also a prison chaplain, and a police chief there. And what people couldn't see is they were both suicidal. Neither had been sleeping. Both were unhappy. Their marriages were falling apart. Everything was going wrong. And I didn't make any money from the seminar, but it was the greatest joy because both of these guys are absolutely incredibly turned around, and it happened quickly because I was the right person to talk to them at that right time. God put them in my life and me in their life. And those guys are, man, they're doing super well, great relationships, sleep like a baby. It doesn't mean they wet the bed, but they get about 7 hours more sleep. And they have joy with their family. They don't work so hard. And I think it's because all of us, myself included, I got several coaches. I have a lot of coaches, and so does Tiger Woods. He has 3 or 4 coaches. Professional coaches have coaches because and I'm a coach, but if you don't have someone coaching you, how are you going to, sometimes we become blind to our own mistakes. So I am a coach. I do coach people, and I absolutely love being coached as well. Again, it's another way I can serve any way that I can.
you've touched on some really important things there, because whether you're a coach or a frontline worker or police department, you can, I mean, you want to be able to serve, but also being able to like get that guidance and to be able to have that support is important, so you can contribute, so you can show up and be level-headed and know that you're making the right types of decisions in the heat of the moment.
Sure.
And by doing the prep work beforehand and throughout, and then also decompressing afterward, however you need to do that. So I'm really curious. So I know I'm so excited to talk with you again very soon. It's always such a pleasure, but I don't want to keep you on the phone all night. But because you do training and you offer different services, so for those who are going to watch this video or listen in to the audio only, how can people best contact you if they want to get involved?
Sure. My email is the best way to get me. It's RM, stands for Richard Morris. It's RM at richardmorristraining.com. RICHARDMORRIS training.com. And if anybody would like, I just had a book come out a few weeks ago. It's an international bestseller. It's #1 in 28 categories internationally on Amazon in the first 24 hours or so. So it's not because of me, it's because of Kyle Wilson. He is an incredible publisher, marketer.
Amazing.
He is, and he's so sweet. He's one of the kindest people that I know. And I'm part of his inner circle group. And I wrote a book with some wonderful people in there. But if anybody would like a copy of my chapter, I'll be more than glad to send that to him, to anybody. It won't cost anything. And if there's some things that I can do where I could like send a resource or that type of thing, if they'll shoot me their email and their name and email, then I will be glad to include them. And I think that they would enjoy it.
Thank you so much, Richard. Say that again. Your audio is cutting out.
And they can pass it on to their friends because it'll be a digital of the chapter and so on. So
awesome.
They forward it to Mama and Uncle Pete and Aunt Sue. But that would be fine. because if I know that we're only here for just a brief time in life, we've got to do everything that we can to fulfill that purpose that God has given us, that God has put in our hearts. If we know what that is and we're not doing it, we're not going to be happy because we're living not a life unfulfilled. So me, I never know. Tomorrow may be my last day. Hope not. I mean, I'm already deciding. You know, I'm middle aged now because I'm in my mid 60s, but I don't think I'll go out and buy a red sports car and motorcycle. You know, through this midlife, I don't have a midlife crisis, midlife excitement, but I want to do what I can as often as I can, as much as I can before I'm gone, because we only have so much time. It's measured. It's like the grass in the field, as you hear in Ecclesiastes, it just blows and it's gone.
Well, thank you so much for getting on a call with me tonight, Richard. It's always such a pleasure. You have such a big, beautiful heart, and I am so happy for the work that you're doing in the world, but just for any opportunity where we can share what you're doing outside of Texas and outside of, you know, the Ziglar Corporation. Is just there's amazing ripple effect there, and I'm just so honored to know you and have you in my life.
Thank you. I feel the same way, Mandy. I have people that I'm reaching and coaching and so on all over the world, literally all over the world. And so I'm hoping one day when all the travel bans are lifted, maybe I can go travel to some of those places. But what a joy it is to know so many people of different cultures. That's exciting.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's like getting something new to eat, you know, or going to
Yeah.
you have something new.
You had me at eat.
Well, thank you, Mandy. God bless you, and thank you for all that you do. I am incredibly honored and proud to be able to call you friend. You're a difference maker in this world.
Thank you, Richard. So I